Okay, yes, my microphone is on, beautiful. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up my slides for you all. Just one moment. There we go. All right, I am wildly excited to be here today, and I hope you all are as well. This is literally my favorite event that we put on absolutely ever, and it is so exciting to me to be up here in front of you guys. So welcome. I'm gonna be talking about self-acceptance and community building today, which I think are really the big two reasons why we're here. So I wanted to highlight what we're going to be talking about all day. So who the heck am I? That's me. Hi. I work at AuSM, as many of you know, although my day job has very little to do with what I'm up here talking about. I do marketing and communications. I also am a writer. I have a blog. I've always been a writer. That's sort of a special interest of mine. One of my other special interests is octopuses, which you might be able to tell from my lovely tattoo here. Love them. I also do aerial arts. I do circus stuff, so that's another special interest of mine. I'm married. My lovely husband is here, and I'm mother to 3 cats. So those are sort of some fun facts about your lovely host today. But obviously, there's more to me than that, and we're going to be delving sort of into my backstory first and talking about my personal journey with mental health and with autism. And I want to be really upfront that probably everyone in this room could tell a very similar story today. All of you have had really, I'm sure, remarkable journeys with coming to self-acceptance and with learning how to manage your autism and live in a world that isn't always built for you. But I think that I have found a couple of lessons along my way that I would like to highlight and share with you. So this is me as a little one. I grew up pretty darn happy as a kid. I was pretty high anxiety, but I was very lucky in that my particular black and white thinking manifested in rule following at school, being a perfectionist at school, and being obsessed with grades, which it turns out is a good way to make everyone think that you're doing fine. Like, sweet, she gets straight A's, not a problem. But underneath all of that, there was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of feeling like I didn't quite fit in, a lot of catastrophic thinking. I was that kid who got a B in 5th grade and was like, oh no, I'm not going to get into the right high school, and then I'm not going to get into college, and then I'm not going to get a job, and then I'm going to die. No one, for some reason, picked up on the fact that that was maybe a bit excessive. And so autism was never thrown out as a diagnosis for me, which is very common, especially for women. I made it through my junior high years. I moved into high school, and things got really bad for me. That perfectionism, that drive started pushing me to do more and more and more until I burned out, and I burned out really, really hard. And that's when I developed an eating disorder. I think that's, gonna stay right there for a second. Yes, so I found that a way to control my emotions was to control food. And this is not uncommon for women on the spectrum. It's a really easy way, especially if you're dealing with sensory issues, especially if you're dealing with anxiety. It dulls everything, it makes it a lot easier. So I spent my junior and senior years of high school and all of my college years not really eating at all. And it turns out that is really bad for you emotionally and mentally and does not lead to a very happy life. It was really, really dangerous. And in conjunction with it, I fell into a really, really deep depression. I had no idea why I was on this earth. I didn't feel like there was a point in my being here. And I didn't feel like I had connections to the people around me in a deep way. It really ended up at a point where I could have died. I was actively suicidal for quite a lot of college. And I think that if I had had that autism diagnosis, if I had had a bit of community, a bit of understanding, things could have gone differently. But nobody in all of my therapy and all of the medical professionals that I saw suggested that I had autism because I looked different from the typical presentation of autism. So what I want to do today is talk about how do you go from that? How do you go from feeling utter despair to using autism as a lens to view yourself, to find pride, and to build community, and then move from those things into helping other people, because that has been the most important step of my journey. Every time that I have made progress at loving myself and being better to myself, I have found that it helps other people too. And that seems really counterintuitive. And sometimes when I say it to myself, I think that I am just making up excuses to be selfish. But then I hear someone else talk to me and they say, no, the way that you speak about yourself gives me permission to speak kindly about myself. And that's one of the most powerful things that I have heard from others in my life. So let's talk about how do you actually do that. This is the challenging part. How do you go from deep despair to a thriving community? Caveat, I'm not a mental health professional. Nobody can just give you a series of steps that will fix any mental health problems that you might be dealing with, give you a sense of pride, all that good stuff. This is really, really challenging work. However, I can give you some suggestions of what has worked for me and what I've seen be helpful for other people. So some of the things that really changed for me were when I got a diagnosis that allowed me to reframe who I was. And all of you here, I assume, have some diagnosis similar to mine that allows you that same lens, the lens that says you're not a broken neurotypical, you are a perfectly functioning autistic, and you just need to find out the right ways to function. That gives you connection. It gives you other people who are like you. It gives you a community, which is right here in this room. It gives you skills, because there are tons and tons and tons of autistic people who have come before you, who have figured out what works for them and written it on the internet and in books and in this presentation right here. It gives you some understanding. It allows you to think about, well, maybe it's not that I'm lazy, maybe it's executive functioning. Maybe it's not that I'm highly anxious, maybe it's that I'm having some sensory difficulties that nobody else is feeling or understanding. It gives you a different way to think about yourself. And finally, it gives you some acceptance. That was the biggest piece for me. It allowed me to say, I don't care if other people don't work this way. This is how I work, and I'm happy this way. I actually think I'm pretty fabulous. Screw anyone who doesn't like me. This picture right here is me and my beautiful work wife, Jillian, in the back, who is one of the greatest sources of acceptance and community that I have. She's been really integral in helping me build my autistic pride. So having people like that can be a huge part of making this journey and moving from a difficult place into being an advocate. So, as I said, what I didn't really expect was the way that taking care of myself translated to other people. There's a lot of examples of this, and we're going to talk about 3 major areas that building skills provides those skills for other people. Every time you educate somebody, it educates them for all autistic people. And every time you ask for accommodations, those accommodations become easier to access for everyone else. So finding a community and being part of it is self-love, but then building that community is advocacy. And they're really, really inextricably linked in my mind. I think it's almost impossible for me to love myself without loving people who are like me. And sometimes it goes the other way too. Sometimes when I can't love myself, I look at somebody else who is like me, and I know that I love them, so how can I be mean to me? So that's the journey that we're going to take today. But how do we do it? It is so, so, so difficult. And I don't mean that in a discouraging way. I mean it in that we can do this together and we can support each other, but let's not have unrealistic expectations. I was unaware. Apparently a buttload is 126 gallons. Thank you. So the first thing that I want to talk about, and I put this in almost every presentation that I ever do because it is so easy to forget and so wildly important. The first step to feeling better, if you are ever in a bad place, is to sleep and eat and take your dang meds and move your dang body. It seems very, very simple and very stupid, and in the moment, it's like, that's not going to help. It helps. I think my husband can attest to this. If there are times where one of us is cranky, I will immediately ask, how long has it been since we ate? Has it been too long? I think it's been too long. Let's put food in our bodies and see if we feel better. Surprising amount of the time, that works. So if you are not currently getting those very basic needs met, it is almost impossible to start working on the harder skills because your body isn't getting the fuel it needs, it isn't getting the rest it needs, it isn't healthy. You need to be hitting those very basic levels first before you can start building on them. Then we have some other possible options for working on self-acceptance. I broke these down. You can break them down in a variety of ways, but ongoing strategies. This is one that I try, and these are things that I try and practice almost every day. Mindfulness is a huge buzzword right now, and it can sound really cheesy. And when I first started hearing about it, I was really prickly about it because I was like, well, I don't want to sit around and cross-legged and go woo. That doesn't sound very useful. Mindfulness is really just being very aware of what is happening in the exact moment. It is being present. It is not allowing your brain to think about the future or think about the past. It is not judging what's happening now. It's just being aware. That's very difficult. It is a practice. You have to do it a lot of times to get better at it. And there are a ton of ways that you can do that. If you look up mindfulness practices or mindfulness exercises, you can find more concrete ways of doing that. I really like to use sensory versions, things like a body scan, or 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 that you can smell, 1 that you can taste. That's a way to bring your attention to the present moment. And that can help to limit all of the extra anxiety and feelings and bring your emotions to, am I safe right now? Am I comfortable right now? Sometimes you're not. More often than not, you are. More often than not, nothing is actually threatening you. And being aware of that can be very calming and very comforting. Gratitude is also an ongoing strategy. This is personally not one of my favorites, but I know many people who really like it, which is noticing every day and writing down something that you feel grateful for. You might do that in a slightly different way than writing it down, just noticing it. You could do art journal and something like that. But being aware of the fact that there are things in your life that you like and that are good. And I promise you that there are things in every single one of our lives that are good. Sometimes it's more challenging to see them. In addition, you also need to start building skills. So those are strategies that you can use. The ongoing strategies are things that you use introspectively. The skills are things that you use to manage the world around you. At least that's how I like to think of it. Therapy, I can't sing the praises of therapy enough. Therapy is really hard. And I will say that finding the right therapist is really challenging. So I'm sure many of you have tried therapy and not found it super helpful or found that you didn't click with the person. And that can be very frustrating and discouraging. It takes time and it takes trying out different people and figuring out what you like and what you need out of therapy to make it super useful. But when you get that click, it is wildly helpful. And just for context, I've had 2 therapists in my life that I have really, really clicked with, and I have seen probably 15 therapists in my life. So that might sound discouraging, but the one that you want is out there. Just gotta keep looking. I personally am a big fan of planning and organization. This is one of the ways that I manage my life. I like to track my habits. So if I know that I'm having trouble drinking enough water on a daily basis, in my planner I write down a place to check off how much water I'm drinking every day because executive functioning is a challenge. And so that's how I get some of these basic things like sleeping and eating, but also larger skills. If I'm working on my mindfulness, I put that in there. If I am working on a bigger project, I like to put that in there so that I can see it get checked off and feel really good about myself. That's my personal dopamine rush, is checking something off in my planner. In addition, if you don't make a plan for how you're going to use skills for things like therapy, it will not happen. You can say, well, I'm going to do better at setting boundaries in my relationships. That's great. When are you going to do it? Who are you going to do it with? How are you going to do it? You don't necessarily have to write those things down, although I like to do that so that I don't forget it. But if you want to engage a skill, something that you learn from therapy, something that you learn from a book, you got to make a plan to use it, and you got to make a plan to use it long term, because otherwise it doesn't get ingrained and you forget about it and you stop using it. I also highly recommend support groups, which AuSM has, and I know many of you have gone to them. We have 3 each month for adults on the spectrum, and those are a great place to hear what other people are doing. And that's personally one of my favorite ways to learn. That's one of my favorite ways to get skills, because Okay, we're talking, I know there's therapists in the room and I love you guys, but if you haven't lived it, I don't trust your skills. If you haven't used the skills actively, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be effective for me. But if I hear somebody else who's autistic and they've managed to make it work and it has managed to be effective for them, I trust it far more. So I highly recommend checking out support groups or online groups, anything like that. You can get some really great resources there. We also all have crises. So those top ones are things that you do to sort of bring up the general tide of your life, bring your baseline up. There are still going to be crises. There are going to be times where things get really bad and you need skills to engage in those moments. I highly recommend having a sensory toolkit for those times. I have a hot bath, I have Epsom salts, I have a glass of wine, I have chocolate, and I have nice scented candles. It's very cliche, I don't care. That's what works for me. When I have a crisis, I do that, I put on my footy pajamas and I get into bed. That is how I manage crisis. Yours might look very different, but those sensory ways of calming are wildly important because when you are having an emotional response, it acts out in your body. Your muscles clench, your heart starts beating faster, you breathe differently, and if you can use your senses to calm those changes in your body, sometimes the emotions will follow, or at least they won't get any worse. In addition, I also like to literally write out a list of who I call in crisis. I haven't had to do this in a while, but I used to have it taped up next to my bed that if I was concerned about my safety or if I was concerned about literally losing my mind because there were times where I felt like I couldn't hold on to reality, I knew exactly who I could call and I would reach out to those people in the order that they were written. Because when you're in the crisis moment, it's too hard to figure that out. So you want to do it ahead of time. I forgot to add the link here into the slides, but I can send it out later. There's this really, really great website that's called 100 Ways to Make It Through the Next 5 Minutes. And it's just a list of 100 things that you can do. They're very simple, they're very basic, but they can distract you for 5 minutes. And if you are at the point where you don't know if you can make it through the next 5 minutes, all you have to do is pick something off of that list that seems like you can accomplish it, and keep doing that until you have made it past the point of feeling completely overwhelmed. And that's the type of, I really like having a list that I can follow so I don't have to think about it when I'm very overwhelmed. So my crisis strategies in many cases involve writing something down and then not thinking at all when I'm in crisis, because your brain is not engaged at that point. I will send it out because I forgot to put it in the slides. Yes.
Did you graduate high school?
I did, yes.
And what college do you go to?
I went to St. Olaf College. I graduated in 2012, yeah.
That's where my brother goes to St. Olaf.
No. Did we have another question up here? Yes, I believe it's called 100 Ways to Make It Through the Next 5 Minutes, but I will email this out to all of you afterwards, just because I forgot to drop that link in there. Finally, I also highly recommend engaging your body in moments of crisis, and this is where mindfulness comes into play. You need to practice that mindfulness, because if you try and do it the first time when you're in crisis, it's going to be really bad. It's going to be super ineffective, and you're going to feel awful about yourself because you're like, I can't even think thoughts. So practice it, but then in the moment, use things like your body scan or things like noticing your senses. So this is sort of my map for taking care of myself, in addition to a lot of introspection, a lot of therapy, a lot of finding support people, all of that kind of stuff. But these were a lot of the tools that I used, and hopefully they can be helpful to you as well. I also did a lot of work. This is a lot of text. This is a bad slide. I also did a lot of work in building self-esteem, which is, I think, one of the most challenging things to do, especially when you're on the spectrum and you're often told you're doing things the wrong way. One of the things that built the most self-esteem for me is doing areas. Look at me being bendy and cool. So I'm going to kind of overview some of these things because it's a lot of text. You should have them on any printouts that you have, and they are also online. I did a type of therapy called DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. It's very skill-based. It's very literal, I think. I found it much more simple than some other forms of therapy. And one of the skills in it is called building mastery. And I have found that an incredibly helpful way to think about self-esteem. Basically, building mastery means doing things that allow you to see progress and allow you to see some accomplishment. So I actually find that building mastery works the best when I try something kind of new, because you can see a lot of progress in the early stages of something. You can see yourself getting better at it and learning it. And that's really a rush. And it's really a way to feel like, oh, I've done something. I'm good at something. And if you incorporate those types of moments into your life on a regular basis, it brings up your self-esteem as a whole. So that's another place where I would plan. I would think about, all right, what am I doing every week that makes me feel like I've gotten something done, or like I'm confident or capable, like I'm competent, and then try and work those in on a regular basis. We as autistics do not like to stop when we've accomplished something and brag about it. It's not really our jam most of the time. I don't care. Fucking brag about it. You did something awesome, and you need to stop and you need to say, that's amazing. I did something that I'm proud of, and I did something that I am glad I did. Force yourself to do it. I write in my planner, I literally have a thing that says, recognize yourself. A planner that I check off every single day so that I know I've taken at least one moment every day to say, have I done something that I feel good about? Choose your friends with care. This one can be really challenging for us. I know many of us struggle with finding community, and it can feel really awful if somebody says, well, your friend isn't being nice to you. Maybe they're not your friend, because maybe they don't have that many. You will find your people. They are out there, and people who respect and love you are out there, and you deserve those people. You don't deserve friends that do things that hurt you, that don't respect your boundaries, and that don't bring you up. So all of you get to decide for yourselves what that means, and all of you get to decide for yourselves what your boundaries are, but I strongly recommend thinking about, do my friends make me feel better about myself? Do the people that I surround myself make me feel good? And if they don't, why are you hanging out with them? I'll love you. I love all of you. I really do. But seriously, there's people in this room who will be that for you. And I firmly believe that all of you can find the people that will be good to you. In addition, I also highly recommend building spaces that are just comfortable. A lot of the time when we're out in the world, we feel like we have to be on guard. We feel like we have to be masking or working pretty dang hard to survive in this world. And not all of us have the freedom to adjust our living spaces however we so desire. But as far as you can, make at least one little space that's yours. If it's your bedroom, and you can set up the lighting the way you want it, and you can set up the sound the way you want it, just so that you have one place where you can go and not feel bombarded. That does so much for improving that overall level of well-being. I highly recommend it. I'm gonna skip a couple. Don't compare yourself to other people. This is my big Achilles heel. I go to aerials and I compare myself to somebody who's been doing it for 10 years, and I'm like, why am I so bad at this? Because I've done it for a year, and that's it. Like, you are not. Your life is wildly different from any other person in this world. There is no situation in which you are making an even comparison between yourself and another person. So every time you try, it's pointless and unhelpful. Don't do it, because even if it makes you feel good sometimes, overall, it's not going to be helpful. And this sort of final chunk here is also about people who will build your self-esteem. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need. A lot of the time, I think that we're afraid of asking for things like accommodations or asking for the types of situations that we want. I have been surprised at how often people are open to it. I have had friends who are completely unaware of most autism-related things. And when I say to them, I'll come over, but I just want to play a video game and be in the same room as you, they're like, okay, I just want to see you. Or at work, if I say, I need to put in headphones right now because the sound I'm doing is really overwhelming to me. Okay, that doesn't hurt anybody. But more often than not, if you need something, it's not going to happen unless you ask for it, and you won't know if you can get it unless you ask for it. So try it. And on that note, be around people who have similar values to yours. Try and find those. Especially if you're somebody who believes in autistic pride, it can be really discouraging to be around people who don't have that sense of pride and love for autism culture. So that can help bring up your general self-esteem. Dang, I put too much stuff on that slide. Oh. All right, so here's where it gets magical. Friendship is magic. When you aren't masking, when you're happy, when you're confident, you being you gives other people permission to do the same thing. So that is where your self-love turns into all of this room. I'm going to brag on myself for a hot minute here. So remember when I was talking about how much of a hot garbage fire I felt like for much of my life? Now that I have figured out who I am and found self-love and blossomed into my role at the Autism Society, this event was my baby. This was what I asked for. And because I said I need a place where I can be with my community and I can feel loved and supported, you all are in this room right now. You can do that too. I believe in all of you because I'm not that special. So that is the type of power that we all have when we accept who we are and start to love ourselves. So your experience can teach other people. When you build skills, those skills are now out in the world. You've thought of them. Somebody else doesn't have to come up with it all on their own. You model for others. So I'm up here. I've got my little Fitbit. I'm modeling for all of you that it's totally cool to fidget here. And all of you can feel more comfortable doing that. The barriers that you break down, so every time you get accommodations at work, every time you get accommodations at school, that makes it easier for the next person. You also start to dismantle some of the assumptions that you had. You start to dismantle your own ableism. So we all grow up in a society that tells us it's better to be neurotypical and able-bodied. And I think that's just a fact about this world. And so when you build your own self-pride as somebody who isn't those things, you start to question the messages that we've been told. And every person who questions them weakens the power that they have and makes it less strong for the next generation. And finally, if you need a community and you can't find it and you go about building it, it's there for the next person. So all of that self-love work that we have just talked about in the previous slides pays forward for the next people. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the specifics of that. God, I really need to stop putting so many words on slides. That's what happens when you make a writer a presenter. So let's talk a little bit about ableism, because that is a huge challenge for many of us who are trying to work on that self-love piece. Is society is not always the most supportive of autistics who love themselves. Society is not always giving us the message that the way that we are and the things that we need are great and good and awesome. So how do we question those messages? And how do we actively fight the messages that tell us not to love ourselves? Read, if that is your jam, but expose yourself to media that is talking about ableism. That was the biggest way that I started to question it, was finding blogs, finding speakers, and exposing myself to other viewpoints. Because the more you hear viewpoints that aren't parroting the same ableism, the more you can question the things you do hear. On a personal level, notice where you feel pain and trauma. Because in many cases, I have found that the places that I had the most hurt were places where people had told me not to be myself, or had told me that something inherent in myself was wrong. And the more that you start to notice that, the more you start to notice that it doesn't have to be that way. That pain is ridiculous, because you can feel proud of those parts of yourself. And you don't have to be ashamed. And then you can work to meet your needs in those places. Because when you are meeting your needs in those places, you're pushing back against ableism. You're saying, I don't care if you think I shouldn't have this need met. I'm getting this need met, and that's right and good. I also think it's really important to notice when you think you should do something. this is something that has been a big problem for me, that, well, I should be able to do it this way. Other people can do it this way. A huge one for me, I recently went through a series of sleep studies and discovered that my natural sleep rhythms require me to get between 10 and 11 hours of sleep a night, which is buck wild and really awful. No time for anything. And for most of my life, up until 2 weeks ago when I got these sleep studies, like, well, I should be able to be fine on 8 hours of sleep. Why am I tired all the time? And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing to sleep 8 hours a night and do all of the things that I was supposed to do, and I would crash over and over and over. There's no should. There's no rule that says you have to get the same amount of sleep as everyone else. Our bodies are different. We're different. So when you think about those shoulds and you're feeling guilty and you're pushing yourself in ways that are feeling really uncomfortable, think about why you assume you should do that and whether there's just a different way to approach it that will feel better for you. Sort of question why you think doing it differently is bad. That second bullet point there. Seek out other groups of people who will be exploring these same viewpoints and doing the same thing for themselves. Disability justice is kind of the framework that you might want to look up for that. And those are the same people who will be happy and proud of who they are that you can expose yourself to, that final bullet point there. This last sort of idea is one that can be weird and challenging sometimes, but I do want us to think about. We assume that accommodations are made for us because there's something weird or special or wrong about us sometimes. Neurotypicals get accommodations all the dang time. This world is set up to cater to their needs. I like to think about it this way. Who decided that houses are built at the height that they are? Well, a bunch of people that are that tall. So everything is made to accommodate them. If in some alternate world, people were much taller, everybody at our height would need an accommodation. Everything is socially constructed. And so just because you need something different doesn't mean that it's inherently worse or inherently wrong. Everybody else is already getting catered to a lot of the time. That reframe has been really helpful for me, so I hope it's useful for you as well. This is in my office right now. It says non-compliance is a social skill. I really like it. So when you dismantle some of that ableism and get the things that you need, you are advocating for yourself. I know that there are some people in this room that don't necessarily love the term advocate or self-advocate, and I don't want to put labels on anyone that they don't prefer. But I do believe that everyone who is autistic advocates for themselves because we have to in order to survive. And so getting what you need and getting those needs met is that advocacy. When you dismantle that ableism that is stopping you from being happy, you're starting a larger conversation. When you question those norms, you're breaking them down for the next person. When you act autistic in public, you're making it more normal. So let's talk about those different areas. I made a cool chart. There's a problem. You think about a possible solution for it. Try that out. It works. You're a genius. Share it with other people. This is what, and then it doesn't work. You change it, you try it again, or you try a new solution. You try that one. Eventually you find something that will help you. All of us are doing this literally constantly. So this is why I really prioritize autistic experiences as a source of wisdom, because we spend every second of our lives doing this in order to survive. Yes. Fair, it's fair. I know, I cut it off a little bit there. Look, Google Images is not the ideal photo editing software. That's fair. Anyway, so we're doing this all the time, which means that we have so much more data about what works than any person who isn't living autism. And again, I don't mean to dunk on professionals because they often have very helpful advice. but they haven't been doing this constantly for the last 30 years. And so the more you do this, the more wisdom that you have to share with other people. And oftentimes, I have seen that autistics are so generous with that wisdom experience. They know how hard it was for them, and they don't want somebody else to have to go through the challenges that they went through. And so if you ask, hey, I had this problem, have you had something similar? They're like, oh, I got 20 resources for you. Let me tell you about what I did. This is advocacy. This is community building. Your experimentation is creating a body of wisdom that is autistic knowledge. So recognize that and be proud of that. Every time you manage to find a skill that is effective for you, you are building an autistic community. You can also, if you aren't finding a good solution, research hacks or ideas online and try other people's, so you can tap in that community of wisdom. Quirks aren't weird, they're brilliant solutions. I firmly believe that. Once we learn all of these things about ourselves, and I promise that each and every one of you knows quite a bit about your own psychology. We are a reflective people. Us autistics, I have found, many of us have a special interest in autism, and we spend a lot of time thinking ourselves in the way that we work. It's not formal research. It's never going to be evidence-based or validated, but it is just a huge amount of experience and evidence and facts that you build up by living your life every day. And so learning all of that, learning about how you work and what your brain does and the ways that you're different from other people, that's part of advocacy too. It might seem like you're just being a bit navel-gazing and thinking about your own brain constantly. I know that I have been accused of being a little too obsessed with finding my own labels. But that's a really important piece of work that we're all doing all the time, because then you share it with other people. You tell your family, oh, well, I don't like it when you turn the lights on all the way because it's too bright for me and I have sensory sensitivities. They've now learned something and they can better anticipate in the future how to accommodate people. You teach your providers. Please don't use metaphors in my sessions. I find that confusing. You teach other autistics. Hey, I've found that the reason I do this is because of something that we've called autistic inertia. Have you experienced that? If you've not heard of that, it's a really helpful term. And it's about having the energy to start something or change what you're doing, which turns out it's very hard. And you help to educate all of your community members, people in your day-to-day life. When I go and do a hobby, and I know what I need and what I like and how I prefer to be spoken to, I educate all of the people in that community. As per usual, I've put too many things into my presentation and we're running low on time, so I'm just gonna speed it along. These are the people that I do service with, that I do aerial arts with. Community has been one of the most life-changing things in my experience. And I only found the community that really pulls me up in the last year. This was at my friend Krista's wedding. She is one of my circus friends. And at one point during her wedding, we all escaped to her bedroom and started doing contortion and ended up with this picture because we're a bunch of weirdos. Being weirdos together is the best. You don't need to be normal with your friends. You need to do what you guys like to do. Community can be very challenging to find. So I have all of these recommendations, and I feel like you guys have probably all heard them before. And it can be discouraging if you've tried a bunch of them and not found your people. I went through 10 special interests looking for community before I found the one where I felt wildly supported, where people would scream that they love me when I walk in the door, where if you do something right, everyone stops and starts applauding for you. I go to a weird circus school, you guys. Everyone's really intense, but it's what I like. Everyone is just aggressively kind. And so it took a lot of time for me to find the people that worked for me. And you gotta keep trying. Because once you find it, good Lord, is it life-changing. And that community is advocacy. Some of you are in this picture right here. This was at conference this year. It was super fun. Once you start building those communities, you become more visible. People start to see you for who you are. You feel more comfortable being who you are. You can speak louder and you're taken more seriously. This group of people in this room has more power than I do writing an email to my senator. When we're together, we're more powerful. But we also create spaces that are safe for ourselves and for other people, and that is a huge part of advocacy. I'm sure there are things that I have not thought of in this event for making your experience comfortable, but I worked really hard to try and think about all of the things that you all might need, because I know you guys and I care about you guys, and creating this space is important to me. So when you go ahead and create spaces like this, you are changing other people's lives. You are doing advocacy for them and creating spaces that are safe for them. I have found that most often other autistics are the ones who are the most supportive and the most committed to each other's freedom. So finding other autistics who care about you is so important. And I hope that you can connect with some people in this room today that will be that for you and be that community and help you build your advocacy. Oh my God, that was a lot of content. And I finished on time. I'm so proud of myself. Thank you, everyone.